A warm welcome to Diplomatic Channel. This week, Iran admits to taking down the Ukrainian flights with 176 people on board by mistake. So where does that leave the country and others in the face of renewed sanctions by the United States? Meanwhile, Iraq still insists on U.S. troops withdrawal from the country. Plus, wrap up a previous discussion on major events that shape 2019. I am Amarachi Ubadi. Let's make a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles. We'll be right back.
Iran has welcomed any international cooperation concerning the recent Ukrainian plane crash. President Hassan Rouhani made this known during a phone conversation with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, respectively. Mr. Rouhani, during the conversation, said international cooperation had to come within the framework of international regulations, which is aimed at clarifying dimensions of the incident. Meanwhile, hundreds of exiled Iranians living outside their homeland have been holding rallies around the world to mourn victims of the Ukrainian plane crash. In Germany, they placed flowers at a casket with a sign reading, "We mourn the 176 victims of the shot-down passenger plane in Tehran." Many are supporters of the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, a group of Islamist leftists opposed to Iran's late Shah but fell out with Shiite clerics who took power after the 1979 revolution. Over in Los Angeles, America, several hundred members of the Iranian expatriate community, the largest in the United States, also gathered in a rally in support of pro-democracy protesters in Iran. Galvanized by protests in Iranian cities following the country's admission that it shot down a Ukrainian airliner and by the January 3rd killing of Qasem Soleimani, Iran's most influential military commander, attendees of the conference in downtown Los Angeles pledged to stand by their fellow Iranians as they took to the streets. Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe arrived in Riyadh on Saturday to begin his visit to the Middle East. Starting with Saudi Arabia, he's expected to visit the UAE and Oman, despite heightened tensions in the Middle East caused by the U.S. killing of Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani and a retaliatory police account. Finally, the Nigeria Diaspora Commission has called for stronger partnerships between Nigeria and India. She said this during the year's celebration of the Indians in Diaspora Day, otherwise known as Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, observed every January 9th to mark the return of Indian leader Mahatma Gandhi from South Africa and Indians in diaspora. NIDCOM chairman Abike Dabiri Erewa drew on the similarities between Nigerians and Indians being the best crop of experts in various fields of human endeavor.
Iran has admitted it shot down the Ukrainian passenger jet that crashed in Tehran, killing all 176 people on board. Remember, media reports in the United States had last week pinned the blame on Iran, which initially denied reports that its missiles had brought down the plane and even accused Western nations of lying and engaging in psychological warfare. In the end, it is true. The Iranian military did shoot down the plane it said it thought was a threat.
Iran released a statement admitting it unintentionally shot down the Ukrainian jetliner on Wednesday, in which all the 176 passengers and crew members on board were killed. The armed forces said they mistook the Ukrainian jet for a hostile plane. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said on Twitter that Iran deeply regrets the disastrous mistake and offered his condolences. He also tweeted that Iran will continue investigations to identify and prosecute the tragedy. Adding a personal touch, the Revolutionary Guards commander Amil Ali Hajizadeh came on television saying air defenses were fired in error while on high alert in the tense aftermath of Iranian missile strikes on U.S. targets in Iraq. He apologized to the nation and accepted full responsibility. Ukrainian International Airlines said on Saturday its plane that crashed in Tehran had received no warning from the Tehran airport about a possible threat to its safety before it took off en route for Kiev. During a briefing by its president and vice president, the airline also denied the aircraft veered off its normal course after an Iranian military statement said the plane flew close to a sensitive military site of the elite Revolutionary Guards. The airline officials bristled at what they said were hints from Iran that the crew had not acted properly. Ukrainians are not impressed by Iran's acknowledgement nor apology, and some are even disappointed with the Ukrainian government's perceived hesitation to blame an Iranian rocket for the crash after other governments had suggested that was the case. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Iran must take full responsibility and be held accountable for shooting down the plane. Canada lost 57 nationals in the crash. Even German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called for those responsible for the shooting down of the flight to be held accountable. She also called for all parties to respect the Iranian nuclear accord, despite Tehran's decision to intensify its enrichment of uranium and moves by the United States to impose economic sanctions. And while the actors await Iran's show of responsibility, families of the victims of the crash call for justice. Some have criticized the Iranian government of spending more time fending off criticism than sympathizing with families of the victims.
Meanwhile, the U.S. and Iraq have been going back and forth on the issue of troops withdrawal. The Iraqi parliament voted last Sunday that U.S. troops leave the country over tensions with Iran following the killing of Iranian military commander General Qasem Soleimani. But the U.S. has a different idea. No, the troops are not leaving, and no, it is not open for discussion. The U.S. State Department says any U.S. official going to Iraq now would not discuss U.S. forces withdrawal. U.S. military presence in the country is designed to continue the fight against the Islamic State and to protect Americans, Iraqis, and coalition partners, so as the State Department in a statement. It followed a phone conversation between Iraq's caretaker Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, during which the former requested Washington to send delegates to Iraq to lay down mechanisms for implementing the Iraqi parliament resolution to withdraw forces safely from Iraq. There are roughly 5,000 U.S. troops deployed in Iraq to support the Iraqi forces in the battles against IS militants, mainly providing training and advice to the Iraqi forces. Let's talk to geopolitical and military analyst, retired U.S. Major Adebayo Adeleke. Major Adeleke, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you, and Happy New Year.
A Happy New Year to you. Now, I don't want to speculate here, but is there a chance that trust has been broken between the U.S. and Iraq because of Iran, causing the government to demand U.S. troops leave the country? And what does this have to do? What does this have to do with the Iraqi commander, the Iranian military commander, Qasem Soleimani?
U.S. will be ill-advised for U.S. by Iraq at the moment, because we also understand that the Shiite minority over there is kind of dominating and given the Kurds and Sunni minority, and they're giving them some problems. So, and inability for the U.S. to push back against the Iranian influence, Iraq will be problematic for the region. So it is important that U.S. maintain their presence over there, either through security force training or other diplomatic channels. Now, that being said, Qasem Soleimani has been a force to reckon with, and the U.S. forces that have deployed in the region can attest to that. Even General Petraeus came on record that he has been his nemesis over the time he was there as the Central Commander, and also when he was the CIA director. And also, actually, there was a task force that was created in Iraq. And we also have to understand as well that despite the fact that the Iraqi war was going on, but in actuality, it's a proxy war between Iran and that's on the Iraqi soil. So, and Soleimani played a pivotal role in there, especially not only in Iraq, but also Afghanistan, in Yemen, and in Syria. It's a force to reckon with. And of course, the previous administration has stalled the idea of taking him out. But once you take him out, because of the Shiite majority over there, there will be an uproar. But the Trump administration has taken a different approach. It means that they don't think the U.S. should be pandering to Iran request. They think that Soleimani should be taken out, and came out. Now, the risk that your previous administration has been kind of averted is actually come to fore, and we're seeing it unfolding. And the unrest is yet to be seen at the high magnitude that have anticipated. Yes, there will be a lot of unrest, but I think it's overall now. The question is the region more secure now that Soleimani is gone or not? That's yet to be seen.
Yeah, but what do you think, as someone who also served in the Middle East sometime, do you think that the U.S. president's strategy has worked, that the security has been restored in some way to the Middle East?
I think the instability will continue for a while regardless, but this had actually upped the ante a bit. I believe now that the U.S., since Iran has not been able to hit back at the United States, are more targeted to be targeted. It gives us, actually makes us unsecured a little bit until the U.S. can get out their act together. This particular region is actually more unstable than it was before.
Does Iraq, as a sovereign country, have the right to ask these U.S. troops to leave, despite the partnerships that's been going on there for years?
Of course they do. And the U.S. forces are not occupying force. But there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of nuances that surrounded this because I was well aware of when we left, when the U.S. left the last time. And I also understand and I know the amount of money being put in when the U.S. has to return back into the region. So I understand where President Trump was saying, but at the same time, it usually doesn't work that way. Because when they tell you to leave their country, yeah, you have to leave their country.
Iran now admitting that it shot down the Ukrainian plane in Tehran by mistake and that it would investigate and fish out those responsible. What is the possibility that the military personnel or whoever it was that pushed the button did so without some command from a senior superior officer who in turn must have gotten the order from the government to bring down that plane?
It's quite fortunate that people actually lost their lives for kind of deal going on in the region. But when you're having airstrikes, the one rule of engagement is to shut down your airspace. When you shut down your airspace, that nothing moves. The military commands the airspace of airstrikes are over. Now, how that kind of slip away without having an civilian aircraft actually without the military knowing, it's quite beyond me. And I think regardless of any military forward, when you're about to do an airstrike, all spaces is much on the airstrike is over. So this unintentional thing, I personally am not buying it. I believe there is operation going on, and I don't know what's going on in that aircraft. To be honest with you, I really don't buy Indian skills and their own support for that, because initially they denied that that did not happen, and actually at one point they said scientifically it doesn't make sense. They can never. Now they came back to saying sorry and all that kind of stuff. And I tried to put the blame, but in actuality, I mean, in combat and have understand airstrike in any warfare. Actually, when you are conducting an airstrike, you have to show that the airstrike protect the civilian, and anything that flies over there has to be clearance from the military command on ground. And I know Ukrainians have a sophisticated military organization as well. So this slip up doesn't really happen, will not happen, and any excuse of that happening, from my perspective, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I remember an almost similar thing happened with Russia and Ukraine during the tensions that were building up in that region also. And a plane, you think a Ukrainian flight was also shot down in a Russian airspace. But then how does this now change, the dynamics of everything that's going on, especially for Iran, which has admitted that, it did shut down that plane unintentionally. And now the U.S. imposing even more sanctions on Iran. Where do we go on from here?
So where do we go on from here? I think everything all boils down to this nuclear weapon deal. and the U.S. is trying as much as possible to use economic sanctions. So I believe it's in the best interest of other nations to come around, talk to the United States of America, and also bring the Iranian back and reach a compromise. Because what President Trump wants, I don't think is going to get it from the Iranian. And what Iranian wants, I believe, is going to get it from the Trump administration. So at this point, other people that have invested have to come to the table and reach a compromise, unless this will continue for a long time.
Coming up after the break, the concluding part of our review of diplomatic events that occurred in 2019. Stay with us.